She sat down beside me on the couch at 2 a.m. when she thought I was asleep. Not beside me the way you sit beside someone when there is nowhere else to go. Beside me the way you sit beside someone when you have chosen them specifically, out of all the available space. The cushion barely gave, but I felt it. I kept my eyes shut. I told myself she was just getting comfortable. I told myself there was a reasonable explanation for all of it. Then she said it, quiet, toward the window, like it was meant for no one, or maybe everyone, but definitely not for me to hear. I've been waiting for you to notice me. I did not move. She didn't know I was awake. That was the part that changed everything, not the words. The fact that she said them anyway. My name is Daniel Carr. I'm 34. I do project coordination for a mid-sized construction firm. Mostly paperwork, mostly phone calls, mostly watching things go wrong on schedules that were never realistic to begin with. I rent a 2-bedroom apartment on the 6th floor that I could not afford alone, which is why I'd posted the listing 18 months ago and selected the first reasonable applicant, without thinking too carefully about what reasonable was going to end up meaning. Her name was Nora Ashford, 29, who worked hybrid for an architecture firm and spent her Wednesday evenings correcting sketches at the kitchen table with a mechanical pencil she refused to replace, even though the grip had been rewrapped in electrical tape so many times the original color was theoretical. That pencil was the first thing I noticed about her. The second was that she did not make small talk. The third thing, which took considerably longer, was that the reason she didn't make small talk was not because she was cold. It was because she was paying attention, fully and continuously, in the way some people have, where you only realize they've been watching after they say something that proves they never stopped. She had dark eyes and the habit of tilting her head exactly once when she was deciding whether to say what she was actually thinking. Her laugh, when it came, was surprised, as though she hadn't planned on finding something funny and her body had gone ahead without permission. She kept a small cactus on the windowsill in the kitchen that had survived 17 months under her care, which struck me as an achievement given the building's commitment to inconsistent heating. We had been roommates for those 17 months. We had never been anything more. That was something I had told myself so often it had stopped sounding like a choice and started sounding like a natural law. I have poor survival instincts around focused women. I should have mentioned that earlier. The night started the way low-stakes disasters usually do, not with a warning, but with a leak. The kitchen ceiling had been developing opinions about our plumbing for 3 weeks. I had submitted 2 maintenance requests and received 1 email and no actual action. On a Thursday in February, at 11:15, something finally gave. The sound began as a soft, continuous dripping, the kind you can almost convince yourself is outside, and then became the sound of someone upending a full glass onto laminate. I got out of bed, pulled on a sweatshirt, and found Nora already standing in the kitchen in her oversized gray hoodie and socks, holding a mixing bowl under the steadiest stream and watching the water fall with the expression of someone who has been personally wronged by a building and intends to document it. The kitchen smelled like wet plaster and old pipe. The overhead light caught the drip in a way that made it look almost deliberate, which was the wrong moment to notice that. "I've already texted the super," she said, without looking up. "What did he say?" "He left me on read." She shifted the bowl 2 centimeters to the left. The stream hit it cleanly. Something in her expression settled, the satisfaction of a person who has solved a small, stupid problem while surrounded by a larger, stupider one. We stayed up waiting. She made tea. I found the backup pot. We sat on opposite sides of the kitchen counter, her with both hands around her mug and her pencil flat on the tile beside her, me pretending to read something on my phone that I was not reading. The dripping slowed after midnight. I put 2 towels on the floor. She said goodnight and went to her room. I went to the couch because the couch was closer, and I was tired in the way that is less about sleep and more about thinking. The living room was dark, except for the ambient orange from the street lamps coming through the blinds, the kind of light that makes everything in a room look like a photograph of itself. I lay on my back and looked at the ceiling and thought about nothing in particular, which was not true at all. That should have been the end of it. I don't know what time she came back out. I had my eyes closed, not fully asleep, that level between aware and gone where sounds register but meaning takes a moment to attach. I felt the cushion give beside me. I registered warmth, close warmth, from the seat directly next to mine. Then, silence, the sound of rain beginning against the window. Then her voice. Not a whisper, just quiet. I've been waiting for you to notice me. She thought I was asleep. I had never been further from asleep in my life. I kept my breathing even. I did not move. She didn't say anything else. After a few minutes, I heard the soft sound of her shifting position. Then nothing. I don't know how long I lay still before sleep actually came. But it came eventually, the way things you cannot control tend to arrive. In the morning, she was in the kitchen before me, coffee already made. She handed me a mug the way she did on most mornings and said, "Super," finally replied, "Someone's coming Friday." Then she sat down with her laptop and her taped pencil, and that was that. She was 3 feet away, acting as though the laws of physics were completely intact. I stood at the counter and drank my coffee and told myself she was tired. She was half asleep. It was a stray sentence from the in-between state, the kind of thing that falls out of a person when their guard is down and means nothing by daylight. I was very good at this, finding the version of events that required the least amount of adjustment. I had been practicing it for 17 months. That is not a coping strategy. That is hiding with better branding. The thing about having a sentence lodged in your head is that it rearranges everything you look at afterward. I started noticing things I had not let myself notice before. Small things, the kind that only become visible once you're looking for them, and then once you've seen them, you cannot understand how you walked past them for so long. The first was the smallest. That same Friday, when the maintenance man came and I answered the door, Nora appeared from her room to check on the ceiling. When I said all sorted, she looked at me for a beat longer than the information required, then redirected her gaze upward and said, "Good." Her fingers were folding and unfolding the same inch of sleeve fabric in a slow, absent-minded loop, and she was not looking at the ceiling the way someone looks at a ceiling they are interested in. She was looking past it. I noticed, also, that she had said "good" in the specific tone she used when she was choosing that word over a different one. She went back to her room. I stood in the hallway a moment longer than the situation required. The second thing happened the following week. I was working from home on a call I needed to focus on, so I'd moved to my room with the door shut. I came out for water mid-afternoon and passed the kitchen, and I caught her voice through the half-open door. She was facing the window, phone to her ear. "I don't know, Priya. It's not like I've done anything about it." A pause. Because what would I even say? A longer pause. Then that short, self-deprecating laugh she used when she was embarrassed by herself. "Don't start." "I mean it." Another pause, and softer. "I know. I know." I got my water. I went back to my room. I sat at my desk for 11 minutes without reopening any of the documents I had been working on. The third thing was her phone. I was not looking for it. I want to be clear about that. I was passing the counter and her phone was face up, unlocked, screen on. I caught it the way you catch something that is simply there. A contact name. My name. And after it, in brackets, in the lowercase she used when she wasn't writing for work. The one who doesn't know. I put my mug down. Then I picked it up. Then I walked to the couch and sat with my coffee and looked at the wall the way a person looks at a wall when it has become the most neutral surface available. She came back into the kitchen 30 seconds later, picked up her phone without remarking on it, and went back to the table. "You okay?" She said. "Fine." I said. Fine was technically accurate. Fine was doing an extraordinary amount of work that particular morning. The fourth thing was what happened at dinner 2 days later. We ate at the table, which we didn't always. Sometimes we were each in our own orbit. Sometimes the evening just aligned. She was talking about a project she was frustrated with. One of those situations where the client kept changing the brief after the work was already done, and she was telling the story efficiently and dryly the way she told stories. And I made a comment that landed right. The kind that catches you off guard. And she laughed. That real one. The surprised one. And then she looked at me. Not the polite social look of someone acknowledging that something was funny. She looked at me the way you look at something that you have, privately, been thinking about. Then she looked back at her food. The room changed. No. I changed in it. That evening we ended up on the couch the way we occasionally did, watching something neither of us was fully watching, in the same space with our separate silences. We had a rhythm, Nora and I. The silences between us had never felt like demands. This one was different, not uncomfortable, just aware. Like something in the room was waiting. She was at the far end, legs tucked under her, turning her pencil slowly in her fingers. The lamp threw a stripe of warm light across the cushion between us. Rain, again. February had a theme, and it was committed to it. I watched her out of the corner of my eye and thought about the first time I had asked about the pencil, some evening months ago, when I noticed fresh tape on it. She had looked at it briefly, shrugged, and said, "It still works." Then she went back to whatever she was sketching. I had let it go then. I was not letting it go now. I was thinking about a pencil she kept because it still worked, about a contact name in brackets, about a voice at 2 a.m. saying something toward a window in the dark. She had stopped turning the pencil. It rested across her fingers now. Still, she was looking at the television with the particular blankness of someone who is watching something behind their own eyes instead. Her foot, tucked under her leg, shifted once. Then was still again. I noticed the cactus on the windowsill behind her, just visible over her shoulder from where I was sitting. Small, fine-spined, completely indifferent to the emotional situation in the room. 17 months in that window, and not a single yellowed paddle. I thought, she waters it on Sundays. I knew this without thinking about it. I knew which shelf she wanted her mug on, and what she put in her tea versus her coffee, and the specific sound she made when she was annoyed at her laptop versus when she was annoyed at herself. I had been paying attention to her for 17 months and telling myself I was not. She glanced over at me at some point. I was already looking at the television. I felt it, the particular weight of being seen by someone who does not expect you to see them back. Then she looked away. I looked over at her. She was looking at the television. We were apparently very accomplished at this. The rain picked up around 11. She uncurled from the cushion and stood, and she was almost at the hallway when I said her name. Just that. She stopped. Her back was to me. She did not turn. "That's all," I said. I stopped. Good night, 1 second of absolute stillness. Then she turned her head, just slightly, not enough to look at me directly, and said, "Yeah, she went to her room." I sat on the couch for another 40 minutes. She was at the kitchen table the following evening when I got home from work, laptop open, takeout container in front of her, and a second container on the counter. She had ordered for both of us. She did not mention it. I sat down across from her, and she pushed the second container toward me without looking up. I ate. She typed. This lasted about 4 minutes. "Nora," I said. She looked up. "I was awake," I said, 2 nights ago, on the couch. "I was awake when you sat down and I heard what you said." Something changed in her face. Not dramatically. Not the way faces change when a person is startled. In the way they change when something that has been held for a very long time becomes, in an instant, weightless. Every layer of it went still at once. She looked down at her laptop. She closed it. She said nothing for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was even in the way that costs something. "Okay," she said. I didn't know whether to bring it up. "Okay, Nora." She looked up then. Not the way I'd been expecting. Not undone or embarrassed or small. She looked like someone who had been carrying something at a significant distance for a long time and had just decided, not from failure, but from something cleaner, to set it down. "I changed the contact name 4 months ago," she said. "I thought about changing it back every couple of weeks. I didn't." She picked up the pencil. Set it down again. Picked it back up and held it. "I've thought about saying something at least 20 times. I could always find a reason not to." That sentence did something quiet to the room. I looked at her hands around the pencil, the way her thumb found the worn patch on the grip automatically, the permanent compression where the tape had been replaced so many times that the layers were structural now. A thing that still worked, a thing she kept keeping. "You don't have to keep going," I said. "If this is too much right now, we can eat, and I can pretend I said nothing, and you can pretend there was nothing to hear. That's still an option." She looked at me for a long, quiet moment. "No," she said. "It's not." She set the pencil flat on the table. "Every time I started seeing someone," she said, "I'd get 2 or 3 weeks in and think, this would be easier if it was just him. Not in a way I wanted to name at first, just quieter. Like there was a version of every conversation I was already having, somewhere else, that felt more like the real one." She looked at the pencil. I thought it would pass. It kept not passing. I moved my takeout container to one side. "When something good happened," I said slowly, "you were the first person I wanted to tell. Not because you were there. I would have called you if you weren't. When something went wrong, same answer. I told myself it was proximity. Habit. Comfort." I looked at her across the table. I had been telling myself that for a long time. She looked at me with something I had no clean word for. Then, very quietly, she said, "You're slow. I have poor survival instincts around focused women." The laugh came out surprised, the real one, the one she hadn't planned. Her hand went briefly over her mouth, like she was startled by herself. Then it dropped. I reached across the table and covered her hand with mine. She looked at it for a moment. Then she turned her hand over and held it. She looked up at me, and there was nothing guarded in it anymore, just the way a person looks when they have finally stopped managing how they look. "I kept thinking I'd missed the window," she said, "that at some point it becomes impossible to say, and you just carry it." "It wasn't impossible," I said. "No." She agreed. "It wasn't." We sat like that. The takeout was getting cold. Neither of us moved toward it. From the apartment directly above came a significant thud. The upstairs neighbor's dog, a retired retriever named Gerald who had no reliable sense of his own size. We both looked at the ceiling at the same moment. Then we looked at each other. "Gerald," she said. "Gerald," I agreed. 3 months later, she replaced the tape on the pencil grip at my desk using my scissors, and I moved her mug from the drying rack to the cabinet she preferred without being asked, because I had known which shelf she wanted for a long time and had simply stopped pretending I didn't. That was the week we stopped explaining things to each other. It was a relief in the specific way that honesty always is. Not exciting, exactly, just lighter. A year after that, a pipe burst in the bathroom. The building had opinions, and so did fate. Nora sat on the counter directing me through the water valve procedure while I crouched under the sink with a torch and insufficient confidence. And when I finally got it, she said, "See? Useful," I said. "I've always been useful." She said, "Debatable," and I looked up at her from under the cabinet and she was already smiling. And that was us, entirely, and it was enough. 2 years later, when people asked how we met, she would say, "He answered a listing and took the bedroom with the noisy radiator without complaining once." I would say, "She arrived with a broken pencil and complete certainty, and I was slow." We never quite agreed on the important part, when it started, what counted as the beginning, what the actual first moment was. She had her version. I had mine. Neither of us ever convinced the other, and neither of us tried very hard. What I know is this: nothing important appeared overnight. It had simply stopped hiding. It had probably always been her. I just needed a 2am ceiling leak, a borrowed mixing bowl, and 17 months of being in the same room as someone who never stopped paying attention, before I finally started paying attention back.